Okay. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Okay, hi everybody. So I was talking to Doug about this assessment I do when kids come in and their mom's telling me everything that's going on, but I don't see it because they're on their best behavior with me. So we do this little assessment that kind of gets them to come out of it. It's an anger assessment, but I call it and I tell them this. I say, I hate how it says anger assessment because it's really more of a big emotion assessment because anger is your secondary emotion. There's something underneath that. So I try to explain that to them. But I'm going to try to hold it up and then I'll send the book to Doug and you can put it in the chat where I get this from. It's actually in Doug's office. So if you ever want it, it's in Doug's office. But the first page looks like this. And what they do is they draw, it says use words or pictures. So if they're older, they'll use words. If they're younger, they'll usually draw the pictures. Or if they're artistic, they'll draw pictures. But it starts out with afraid and what makes them afraid. And so they go into drawing what they're afraid about, and then it'll say confused, and they'll draw what they're confused about. And then after you see them filling all these in with their pictures or their stories, you're kind of starting to see a theme going on. Whether it's with parents or mom or sisters, a lot of times it's with sisters or brothers, and our parents not listening. I had one where over and over and over the girl would draw a picture like her mom would be making supper and she would come in and tell her something and her mom would say, oh, that's great, and she would just keep making supper. I remember her picture, she drew that like her mom wasn't listening to her. So you'll get to, after you finish this page, you'll see that there's this theme going on. You can pick out like, okay, a lot of these are aiming towards mom or sister. And it goes, just to name some other um, things that are on here, like not only is it like afraid, confused, but nervous will make people angry. Just having that nervous feeling, it comes out looking angry, but they're really nervous inside, or embarrassed. So I know a lot of times if you see someone react at something, um, it's not really anger on the outside. On the inside, it's just they're embarrassed or frustrated or sad is another one on here. And so the next page you get into is rating them. So then you'll go down and let me show you the page. And it's afraid. How would you rate it? Never, not often, sometimes, often, all the time. Then you go down anger, confused, disappointed, embarrassed. And it throws a few in there like excited, happy, and then frustrated, guilty. And then you'll see these numbers and which ones will be most often or all the time. And you'll see the fours and your fives, and it'll start pinpointing where that anger is coming from. So it's just kind of assessing where's the anger coming from. And then the next sheet is, and I'll kind of show it to you. I don't know if you want to just look at it real quick. It's the same thing, but it's jealousy, lonely. So that's a couple of my girls actually in their own families feel lonely. Loved, mad, nervous, proud, sad, scared, worried. So again, this sheet does the same thing as the one before. It kind of pinpoint. You look at all the four, oftentimes they feel this way, or the fives all the time, and you're seeing a theme and you're seeing some things come together as why they're being so angry, why these outbursts, why these meltdowns. And then I have and then the next sheet is draw pictures of a time when you were angry. And so what they do, they have about six little spots where they can draw pictures. And the same thing, you'll start confirming, yeah, this looks like it's mom's just not paying attention or mom's not hearing her. So you have to bring in some listening skills into the session with mom. But what I really like about this assessment, oh, and then it just has another sheet just to kind of pinpoint where the anger is at. List 10 things you can do when you get angry. And so they just list the 10. So now you're starting to get into some coping skills and individualized kind of coping skills to where, well, it helps if I just go to my room and I read a book um or I draw or something like that. Well, so you'll get some funny ones like this one girl, she likes to ball up her little socks and throw them at the air vent because she likes that little clang when they hit it, and that just kind of relieves some stress for her. But they might kind of struggle on this. You can give suggestions as well, of course. But okay, this is the part I really, really love. So the coping skills are really good about that page. But this is solving the problem. And so it goes all the way through of coming to, okay, so I see all this and they're seeing all of it. And here's some coping skills, some breathing and whatever else. Um, and then it goes into when I become angry, I usually, and they put down what they're angry about, which results in probably some kind of reaction from mom and dad. Instead, when I become angry, I can cool down with the counting. So, reinforcing your coping skills, counting, exercising, talking, and then they get to list some of their own. So, you're coming up with those coping skills. They're starting to think, oh, I can do something different. I can do that. I can count. I can breathe. I can. I was just telling the little girl yesterday because she likes to exercise. I said, you can drop and do 5 push-ups and get that outburst out. And she's like, yeah, she did it right there in session. I'm like, there you go. Okay. And then so problem solving. So this last sheet is really awesome. So they list their problem and their anger, and say it's frustration with their mom or their sister, and then what is the alternative. And so they put their favorite coping skills down. There's 5 little spaces right there. And then this last thing is so awesome. It says consequences to each alternative. And then they get to say, oh, if I breathe, if I go to my room, if I throw socks at the vent and get anger out that way, then the consequence to that alternative is a peaceful home. No angry, no getting punished, no whatever they've been experiencing this whole time of parents yelling at them. My parents won't yell at me, and so I really like that part of the alternative when you apply your coping skills. And then out of all your alternatives, what is the best choice? And so what's their go-to each time? So it kind of actually is this comprehensive, and it goes through the entire, okay, why am I getting angry, pinpointing, and then what to do about it. And then after you've done something about it, what's different? I mean, your house is peaceful, you're not getting yelled at, your phone isn't getting taken away, those kind of things. So yeah, that's the one that is one of my go-tos when they very first get into the session. So
Yeah, that's good. So one thing that going through that when I hear you talking about that, reminds me of REBT is one of them, the A, B, C, D, E, so you can, as a child, they know their ABCs, right? So you can go, hey, A, B, C, D, and all that.
yeah.
But the other part is Dan Siegel would say, hey, help them to name the emotion, to tame it, so that they can understand. And then reframing. So one thing that I use is reframing, where like me, public speaking, hate it, right? But what I do is like going, this isn't anxiety, this is excitement. So I changed the way that I look at it, right? So this is
Right.
excitement. This is exciting for me to be able to do these things in front of people and all that. So it can change the way that I look at it. So I'm reframing even the words, and that gives me a whole different emotion, or takes the anxiety away, or displaces it, or whatever. It doesn't take it away, but you know what I'm saying. Anyway, I love that intervention, especially with children, because they don't know what's going on, and they have these emotions that
Right.
they're trying to figure out. And so I love, and the other aspect of it was the consequences of it. So what are
Yes.
the consequences of this thought, or this emotion, or this behavior, or whatever? And then so one question I would have is, how do you incorporate the parents into this, or do you?
Yeah. So, like I said before, if it's listening skills, I bring the
Yeah,
parent in
yeah,
and we go over listening skills and we practice them in session.
yeah,
And then that's their homework. At least sit down twice this week and practice listening skills on just a neutral story that, isn't high emotions. And then when you get into those high emotions, then of course kind of have that down, and it's more of a go-to instead of yelling. And yeah.
yeah, absolutely. That's good. That's good. So let me open it up to questions from anybody, especially our students at Calvary, so they can ask some questions about these emotions, or assessments.
And I think this one is really great. I'm very interested in it. Do you know the book or the resource to be able to find it?
Yes, so I will send Doug the book, and then he can post it up on the chat. So
Do you have the book with you, or are
I
those
do
pages you
not
copied off?
happen.
Okay.
I thought I did, but I must have got a different one. And I use the one in your office all the time. But I happen to have one just in case. I had it, when I have someone and they come in and it's like first session sometimes, or second session, I just have one ready to go. So I had it with me.
Awesome.
Is that
But I'll
is
send you the
that
book.
the homework and activity planner book?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
I think you had recommended that earlier, and I've used that with a lot of my kiddos. It's because I like that it kind of uses the same types of assessing for lots of different things, anxiety. So
Mhm.
I use it a lot
Yes.
with anxiety for a
Yeah.
lot of my kiddos, as well
I do that
as
one too.
sadness and
Mhm.
yeah, lots of different ones. So it is really
Right.
good, really
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah, it is.
So I'm just wondering, um, when you're asking them to write the consequences to the alternate behaviors, or whatever, do you involve the parents in that, so that parents kind of know that when they do this, then we should stop? Because if the parents don't stop yelling, then it doesn't work, right?
I know, and that is a hard one. That is a hard one. Because a lot of times it is the parent who's causing, some of the stuff, and a lot of the stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of their anger. I meet with the parents about every 4, 5, 6 sessions.
Mm-hmm.
So I bring them in and kind of inform them, um, of some things without saying, you're yelling at your kid. That's why they're yelling back, or whatever. I
Mm-hmm.
try to break it to them nicely, but yeah, it gets a little sticky right there. But because they're sending their kid in to fix their kid when, they need some counseling too. So we do bring them in,
Mm-hmm.
a little bit and work with them as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, what other questions we have? All right, Carolyn, thank you so much
Okay, you are welcome.
for
And I'll get that book to you so you can put it in the group chat.
right. Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, so I have Jana and Sandeep gonna present a little bit here. So who wants to go first with one? So we can alternate, so you guys don't have to talk so much.
Yeah.
Look
And Jana,
forward-
do you have a preference?
I don't care.
Okay, then
Jana, go ahead, Sandeep.
because I do have to kind of head out at 11.
Oh, okay.
Okay, go ahead.
So, I mean, if you don't mind, then I can do this first part. And okay, so I'm gonna see if can I share my share the screen?
Oh, here, hang on a sec. I'm so sorry. Yeah, here, hang on. Let me see if you can share it now. If not, I will.
Yeah, I think it's opening up. Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna just try to see here. Okay. So so I'm going to share a little bit about genograms. Just curious, is this something that I just want to know how familiar everybody is with genograms, because um, if it's something that you've already covered, just let me know. You know, is that
Yeah, so Sandeep, yesterday we talked a little bit about genograms in our class, so this will be perfect for
okay?
them to go through. And so genograms are an assessment of what we talked about yesterday was an assessment of how generations can affect your emotions and trauma and all that stuff too. So I'll let you
Okay.
go on, but we
Okay.
did talk about it a little bit
A little
yesterday.
bit. Okay. All right. So some of this may be repetition, but some of it might give you a different context as well. All right. Okay. So I'm going to start off with this verse from the Bible, and Deuteronomy 5:9 says, "You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above or um, on the earth beneath or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord, your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sins of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments." Right. So this is an interesting verse that I don't know if you've really had a lot of opportunity to think about it, but it seems to say that, I mean, in the Bible, that there is a sense that consequences kind of get moved on from one generation to other generation. It just doesn't stay within one family unit, right? And so in psychology now, they talk about families as systems, and families have rules, and families are an emotional unit. And so the guy who first talked about this is a psychologist and physician called Dr. Murray Bowen, who kind of just laid out the details of how um, family system dynamics work. And it was a real powerful thing when he introduced it. Some people say that he had the rare honor of being one of the few people to come up with a genuinely new idea it's not a new idea from a biblical perspective, I think, but it is a new idea from in the world of psychology, right? So I don't know if this is something that you've been introduced in class or not, but so Murray Bowen had 8 big concepts. The concepts of family triangles, and that is that when there is tension between 2 people, typically the way to diffuse that tension is to bring a third person into it. And so typically, when you have, people are stressed and they want to gossip, gossip is basically triangulation. It is like when there is stress between 2 people and you cannot deal with the other person, then you bring another person and you divert that the stress to this third person. So you form a triangle in a family. Another concept that was very important in with Bowen is differentiation of self. There are 8 concepts. I won't go through all of them, but I'll just highlight a few. So the concept of differentiation is that, when you are in a relationship, there is this idea that we are emotionally fused into a relationship. And so there is, we don't function as sufficiently as different ego masses. And so differentiation is a measure of how much you are functioning fused in another relationship versus your own individual self with your own values and ideas and things like that. Ideally, in a relationship, you have to have a good balance between the self and the relationship fusion, right? If you're too fused, then there's no sense of self. If you're too differentiated, there's no relationship. There has to be a balance, right? Then there's nuclear family emotional processes, family projection processes that it's a bit too involved, so I don't want to go through too many details there. But Doug talked about the multi-generational transmission process, and so that is when something happens in one generation, you see that transmitting to the next generation in a very, very similar way. Emotional cutoff is when you have relationships in the family where the ties have been cut to. These are actually very important too, because there is something to be said for who are the people that are being cut off in the relationship and why that cutoff happened. That speaks a lot to family dynamics. Another thing that is very important in family dynamics is sibling position. It's a thing that I always check with, when individuals come in or couples come in, how many siblings they have and which position they are in. And it's very critical because how the family dynamics and family stressors and anxieties have operated on an individual is very dependent on their sibling position. And then there's a societal emotional process, and that is the effect of society at large on the family. This is, how a family genogram could look like. He called it a family diagram. Later on, there was another psychologist called McGoldrick, Monica McGoldrick, who actually developed this into what is now called a genogram. And so I'm going to actually, so a genogram is a graphical representation then of the family tree that displays all these, the relationships between the individuals. So all these different family processes that I talked about, a genogram is a way to visualize it. The way I think of it, it is like, when you go to a doctor and you have an issue somewhere, they do a lot of imaging exercises, like they do an X-ray. So they scan your body to see a bone structure, to see where the problems are. Then they can do different imaging exercises. So when you're doing an assessment of a family, a genogram is like an X-ray of the intergenerational process in the family. When you create a genogram, you can immediately locate where the issues are. And that's why it's really important. And in the program that I am in, it is a requirement for me to create a genogram for every client system that comes in. Even if they are individuals, I still have to do the genogram because there is a systemic dimension to all of their problems, even an individual's problems, and you have to understand it that way. And so Monica McGoldrick has a very good video that describes how she uses it. And so I am going to share this video with you. And just let me know if the sound is coming in properly. And then we can adjust that if needed.
This video demonstrates the creative power of genograms to map family patterns.
Is everybody able to hear it clearly?
And show you how to
Yes.
create genograms
Okay, thank you.
using the symbols that have been standardized and are used in our books, Genograms Assessment and Intervention, the Genogram Casebook, and the Genogram Journey, You Can Go Home Again. We think of a genogram as a one-page story about a family, including the basic legal and biological structure, as well as informal kin over 3 or more generations, and basic demographics about family members, names, ages and other dates, location, health, and relationships. But genograms can easily become so crowded that they become hard to read, and we must always make choices about what to include. Once the graphic becomes too busy to follow, it ceases to be useful. Computers will soon make this easier because we will be able to save information into a database and show only certain information on the graphic at a given moment. But for this video, we will be emphasizing the basic one-page graphic. We want to emphasize also the importance of using the standardized symbols and structure for creating a genogram. This is the only way that genogram mapping can become a shared language we can all read. Thus, it's important to use the agreed upon symbols, although anyone doing specific research on their own family or any other research may want to develop a special key to add particular symbols to show patterns they want to emphasize for that group of people. The genogram is a practical visual tool for assessment of family patterns and context, as well as a therapeutic intervention in and of itself. Genograms allow clinicians to quickly conceptualize the individual's context within the growing diversity of family forms and patterns in our society. Clinically speaking, gathering family information and constructing a genogram should always be part of a more general process of joining, assessing, and helping a family. Information is gathered as family members tell their story in the context of their discussing the problem for which they are seeking help. While basic genogram information can be collected in a structured format as part of a medical record, the information should always be gathered for a purpose that the participant understands and treated with greatest respect. Sharing a family's history is an intimate process, not a mere technical fact gathering. Any question you ask may lead to the most sensitive, embarrassing, or traumatic experience, so it is never something that can be manualized as a list of questions or managed by just collecting the facts. The genogram we are using for this video is for John Rodriguez, who sought help in 2018 for free-floating anxiety to the point of feeling panicky and almost incapacitated. His anxiety focused particularly on his wife's pregnancy. Our presumption is that the genogram may help us develop some hypotheses about this anxiety to help him. He was having trouble sleeping and kept worrying that something would happen to the baby and he would not be there. We show John as the index person, index patient, or IP by making his symbol larger and lower than his siblings when we later add them, and he becomes the central focus of the genogram. By beginning with the genogram template, we have John's parents and grandparents sketched out before we begin. John's symbol, a square.
Hey, Sandeep, is there supposed to be video with it?
Joins his parents.
Oh, yeah,
Square shows his
yeah,
name.
I thought that the video was playing.
No. So you may have to move it to, like if it's on the web,
Okay,
you
okay.
have to, yeah, you have to bring that up.
Let me,
Written above the left.
oh, sorry about that. I thought that you could
Oh,
see.
no
the-
worries.
Of the birth,
Okay,
his occupation, wherever we can fit it. We add also his cultural heritage. His father's
You know how to bring that up.
yeah,
Okay.
well,
There you go.
okay, yeah,
You-
So I'll
you
just-
maybe just back up just a touch.
yes. Okay,
assumption is that the genogram may
There you
help
go.
us develop
Thank
some
you.
hypotheses
yeah, you're
about
welcome.
this anxiety to help him. He was having trouble sleeping and kept worrying that something would happen to the baby and he would not be there. We show John as the index person, index patient, or IP by making his symbol larger and lower than his siblings when we later add them, and he becomes the central focus of the genogram. By beginning with the genogram template, we have John's parents and grandparents sketched out before we begin. John's symbol, a square, hangs down from the line which joins his parents. The square shows that he is male. We add his age, 28, inside the square, his name, written below, and his birth date, 1990, written above and to the left of his symbol. His location then goes above the birth date and his occupation wherever we can fit it. We add also his cultural heritage. His father's family was from Puerto Rico and his mother's family was Italian. All children of a couple are hung down from the couple line in order of their birth, left to right from oldest to youngest. Once the basic family structure and skeleton of who is in the family are drawn, we will start adding information about the family, particularly regarding demographics, functioning, relationships, and critical life events. But we will begin here by adding John's immediate family, since that is his primary focus, and come back to add his siblings and family of origin later. We will add John's wife, Katya, a Russian Jewish immigrant and an only child who is 27 and works as a medical technician. They've been married for 2 years and are expecting their first child, who is apparently a girl, as we can tell from the triangle pregnancy symbol with a circle inside, a circle representing a girl. Next, we add John's siblings, whose symbols, as mentioned, are made smaller and higher than his own. Spouses of siblings are shown even lower and smaller than the siblings themselves, so that the birth order of siblings remains clear and the spouses of siblings are not mistaken for siblings themselves. This will allow you to develop hypotheses related to the structure of the family, including birth order, gender, and distance in age between siblings. We never know whether our hypotheses about a particular family are accurate, but checking out hypotheses about patterns on a genogram is a basic way to learn about the family's history. We see that John Rodriguez is the second of 4 siblings, having an older brother, Jorge, and twin younger siblings, Peter and Marie. Converging lines connect the twins to the parental line. The 3 younger siblings appear to have more education than Jorge, who was working in construction, which raises a question about his role as the oldest relative to the others. Given the distances apart in age, we might assume that John and his 1-year older brother would grow up as a pair, and that the twins, being 4 years younger, would be another pair. Or it might be that the 3 brothers would be a group and the sister would end up in a kind of outsider position. In any case, we wonder what family dynamics might have led the younger siblings to receive more education and what impact educational and occupational differences may have on family relationships. We also see that John's older brother, Jorge, has a partner, Tina. Their connection lines indicating not a marriage, but a committed relationship, shown by two couple connection lines, one solid and one dotted. They have identical twin daughters, indicated by the line connecting their converging twin lines. They also experienced a miscarriage, indicated by a small line with a dot at the end, and then a stillbirth of a son, shown by the small square with an X, indicating these losses came before the twins' birth. Looking back at John's own family, we can see that his parents also experienced a miscarriage before their first son, Jorge's, birth. We now expand the genogram upwards to show the father's family of origin. For a person who is dead, an X is placed inside the symbol, as you can see for the paternal grandparents, a square for the grandfather, and a circle for the grandmother. Birth and death dates are always placed above the person's symbol and separated by a dash. The person's current age or age at death is indicated inside the symbol. On genogram go back more than 3 generations, symbols for individuals in the distant past are not usually crossed out, since they are all presumably dead. On such genograms, only untimely or traumatic deaths are usually indicated with an X. The father, Jorge, is placed lower than his siblings to make clear his place on the sibling line, where he grew up as the younger of 2 brothers, an oldest brother having died early. Looking carefully, we can see that John's father was also named Jorge for that oldest brother who died at age 4, the same year the father was born. That gives added meaning to the father's naming his own son with the same name, Jorge. Exploring family patterns of naming and birth order can reveal a great deal about relationships, as we will see. The second son, Nick, is divorced and has 2 children. As we shall see later, he also had an active alcohol problem and a long cutoff from his father, Diego, although it was repaired before the father died. The grandmother's abortion of the final pregnancy in 1961 occurred because she had been so overwhelmed by the death of her oldest child that she felt she could not bear to risk having another child whose loss would break her heart again. We now move to the mother, Carmela's side of the family. Carmela came from an Italian family that had also had a miscarriage and then twins who died at birth. Following these losses, they adopted a daughter, Anna, shown by a dotted and a solid line connecting to her circle symbol. The same year, the grandmother became pregnant and had Carmela. The couple then had another biological son, Matt, who defines himself as non-binary, shown by a modified symbol that combines a square at the bottom and is rounded at the top. Matt now lives with his partner in California. The parents then took in a foster son, Joe, who has never married and lives in Chicago. Joe's connection as a foster child is shown by a dotted line down to his symbol. Apparently, the father was emotionally abusive to his wife, and the couple separated soon after they took in their foster son, Joe. Finally, we want to include on the genogram key issues of functioning and relationships. 2 important supports for John were his best friends from high school, Tom and Sam, who still live nearby and to whom he is still close. While neither of them is married or a parent yet, he has been able to talk to both of them about his anxiety. Other than his Uncle Nick's alcoholism and his Aunt Anna's depression, family members' health seems generally to be good. John wished he could feel closer to both his mother and his brother Jorge, but was not sure how to improve their relationship. The parents' key connection to their dog Boxer was also apparently a major support for the whole family, as is so often true about pets. We now add lines around the household showing John and his wife, and another line around the parents, the two youngest siblings, Peter and Marie, and the family dog. And then we add the various relationships among family members that John conveyed. Now that we have drawn the basic genogram, we might conclude that it is not surprising that John became anxious shortly before the birth of his first child. We see from the genogram that there was a loss of the first child for the past 3 generations. His father's oldest brother died at 4. His mother's parents lost their first 3 children, a miscarriage, and then the stillbirth of twins. His parents had a miscarriage before the birth of their oldest son, Jorge, and Jorge and his partner experienced the miscarriage and stillbirth before the birth of their twins. Such coincidental stresses are not always the case, but it is surprising how often factors in our history play a role in our current lives and stresses. In this case, other factors may have been operating as well. John's father, Jorge, was named for his older brother who had just died at 4, had just turned 59, just passing the age of 58 that his father, Diego, was when he died. John's mother, Carmela, is just turning 60, also just passing the age her mother was when she died. Could the parents have been passing down their own anxieties about outliving the same-sex parent? Something we know that people generally worry about. Could the parents be passing along the anxiety to their son as he is about to start a new generation of his family? Could there also be a connection between Carmela's conflictual relationship with her older sister Anna since childhood and the conflict of her 2 oldest surviving children, Jorge and John? Jorge was described as athletic and good-looking, while John was short and not too coordinated. Though John has now become successful and his height and lack of skill in athletics no longer play much role in his life. Meanwhile, his brother Jorge is apparently struggling financially, and his relationship with his partner does not seem to be going good. There are also signs of resilience on the genogram, which we always see. First is the fact that John sought help for his anxiety, a good sign that he was willing to acknowledge a problem and find a way to deal with it, which is less common for men and perhaps even more so for those of Puerto Rican or Italian heritage. Other positive signs would be the repair in the grandparent generation of Uncle Nick's cutoff from his father before the father died. On the mother's side, we note her parents' creativity in seeking first to adopt and later to take in a foster child after their obvious struggles with having children. It didn't save their marriage, but the indications are that both parents maintain positive relationships with all their children, even though Anna has suffered frequent depression and she and Carmela are in frequent conflict, and Carmela did not feel as close to her mother as she now wishes she had been. In most cases, we do a genogram like this in the first session and correct and add to it as we learn more about the family. In this case, John felt amazed to see the number of stresses others in his family had experienced and thought that might be a factor in his anxiety. He was opposed to any idea of taking medication for his anxiety and chose to meet again for a second session with his wife, during which we explored their relationships with their families and their anticipation of the new baby. Meanwhile, John had taken the opportunity to reach out to both his mother and his brother Jorge to discuss their experiences of miscarriage and the other losses in the family. After the second session, the door was left open to John for more therapy if he felt he needed it. But he felt he was in a much better position to manage his anxiety and that his family had his back. He said it was also reassuring that he could return to therapy if he needed it.
Okay. So I don't know what you guys think of that, but if you look at what she just demonstrated, this guy came in for anxiety related to the his first would-be child, as his wife was pregnant, and just by looking at the three generational pattern, they were
Yes.
able to.
builds
Oh,
adventure
sorry.
trailers.
Excuse me. Um,
Our Dell Power as Service.
um,
Yeah, what I like about the genograms, it is, you can see the whole environment, you know, of what even just that one person that's in the middle, right, is
Mhm.
subjected to through generations. And so when we talk about assessments, I mean, that is assessing uh everything that all the people have been through and how they are, you know, their behaviors and their thought patterns and all that. But what I like about genograms is you can see patterns that
Yeah.
are established, and then how coping skills through the family. But the other part about it is generational heredity and all that stuff
The
too.
transmission. Mhm.
Being able to see what's been inherited through time and things like that
Mhm.
too.
Mhm. Yes, I want to just mention one more thing about that intergenerational transmission, right? When all these things were done, even when genograms were created, they didn't understand fully what happens with epigenetics. So we know like genetics is like in our DNA, there is the characteristics that, all the features, our hair color, our eye color, and skin color, and all of that is passed on to the next generation, right? Half of our genes, half of our partner's genes is combined, and the kid gets one set of both parents' genes, right? But as genetic engineering has passed on, as developed, they've realized that there's something called epigenetics, where epigenetics is, um, the simple characteristics like the patterns that, patterns of conflict, patterns of behavior that get passed on to the next generation. And so they were wondering like how does that even happen? And what they found is that basically when we have so many genes, but those genes have to be expressed. So basically, it's like a big recipe book, right? If you have a whole recipe book in your house, it doesn't mean that every recipe from that is going to be created. If something has to be made, then you have to open the page to a particular recipe, and then that recipe has to be translated to an actual dish with all the ingredients, right?
Mm.
So our DNA is the whole recipe book. And then you
Mm.
have these genes that tell you like which genes to express and which genes to suppress, right? And so that happens during the lifetime of the individual. So two parents, they've already passed on all of their DNA to their kid, right? That's happened. But the gene expression is the genes that they actually express and in all of their behaviors, when they're doing it, that influences their kid in the kid's lifetime. And that decides what genes actually get turned on and turned off from the recipe, from the full recipe book that they got with their parents.
Wow.
So that's how these behaviors actually get passed on. So it's extremely critical to.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So and it's fascinating how this guy he came with his anxiety, but looking at the intergenerational pattern and seeing that in 3 generations, the first child had died.
Yeah.
Um, and so subconsciously now he has that fear without knowing it. And now, when you make something that is subconscious conscious, so that's what happened, right? When you look at the genogram, and now he is looking at that pattern, and he goes and has an opportunity to speak to his parents and all of those people and talk to them about different things. What was subconscious became conscious, and then now you have control over your thoughts, and now it's not controlling you anymore. And so he was able to overcome his anxiety without actually coming even for the third therapy session.
Mm.
Mm.
That is so good. And the other part that kind of struck me was the dog, right?
Thought the dog was pretty cool too.
Yeah, so the dog being like the chief what do you call it? Anyway,
Part of the family.
well, but controlling helping them to
regulate emotions.
yeah, regulate emotions, the dog. And it's so true. And I was just talking to somebody the other day. It's like animals can do that. It's, you know, they're warm, they, you know, especially dogs, unconditional love and things like that too. So it's just funny that she mentioned that as so broadly in it too. That's good.
Did, yeah. Yeah.
It was awesome. All right, I want to open it up for some questions to y'all, especially our students.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Thomas, as I see your name here,
Yeah.
so you do this with every single client?
Yeah, I'm in my program, I have to. So I just, I do create. So in the first 2 sessions is an assessment phase. And in that assessment phase, I'm talking about getting their symptoms, but I'm also asking them about their generational patterns and things like that. Yeah.
Have you found patterns in the genograms that you have done so far?
Yeah, I mean, almost always. In fact, it's very neat to see similarities between some things that has happened on, say, the husband side versus the wife side, right? You know, like if you'll see, like maybe if the, one side they had, there was, parents had a certain conflict or parents had divorced, and you see the same thing happen on the other side. Or you see like a certain death in the family here, or you see like even twins being born here on one side, you'll see a similar pattern on the other side. So that also helps to explain subconsciously why people choose partners. There is a certain subconscious dynamic that they bring into the relationship.
Interesting.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, there's lots of patterns. Yeah.
One more question. So do you think this genogram assessment would be helpful in helping someone break generational, what's the word I want?
Patterns?
Like, like generational, somebody who's in addiction, or, how they say it's been passed down. Would this be helpful in helping to break that, in your opinion?
Yes. So you see addiction also passed on from one generation to another generation. Yeah. And so they call it the transformational character. You can be a transformational character in that, right? And so when you make all of the unconscious conscious, when you actually decide to work on yourself, and of course, there's always the intervention of the Holy Spirit, right? And so with all of these different factors, an individual can break that pattern. And like the Deuteronomy 5:9 passage that I read, the curse, so to speak, passes on 4 generations, but the blessing passes on 1,000 generations. So the trick is, and I tell this to my my clients too, you can be the person who breaks the pattern, and then that pattern will be a different pattern now for your next generation. So the work that you do here in therapy is not just for you, but it is for all your generations to come.
Great. Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I mean, yeah. So, I mean, I think that's really a good thing to say too, as well, as like what you do now can affect generations to come. And we know that, right?
Yeah.
That's good. But a good reminder.
Thank you.
How much more time you have?
It's almost 11.
All right, you can go if you need to.
So I'll head out. I'll be missing your presentation, Jana. So
excellent. Yeah. Well, I've got it recorded, so you'll be able to see it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Hey, thank you for your time. Sure, really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, Jana.
Okay, are you ready?
Jana's got some good ones here.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen here. I can figure out how to do this.
Yeah, there it is.
Okay, so I'm going to go with this. So I'm doing 3 different assessments. This first one, can you see my screen?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this first one is attachment, because what I often see with either trauma or in marriages is there are attachment styles that are butting heads.
Mm-hmm.
And I have not been able to find an attachment quiz that I really, really, really like, but
Yeah.
I found this one online and it is free. So I kind of like that for my clients.
Yes.
So basically it goes into the different types of attachment. They do like it's only like a 10-minute questionnaire, and then they immediately get the results with a small description as to what their attachment style means for them. So I use this really to bring them understanding, because oftentimes just by their behaviors and their patterns, I can kind of tell where they are in their attachment style. So like I said, they get just the description that goes to their attachment style. Let's see here. So I was trying to have this all set up, and it's not working. So I'm going to go back here. So just, I'm sure you guys have learned a lot of this, so I'm not going to go over it. You know, Bowlby created it in the 50s.
Yeah, you can go over it. Actually, you know, for the students,
okay.
We're gonna do this later today.
Oh, okay.
This quiz. So yeah,
Okay.
if you can go over
Awesome.
as much as you want, that'd be great.
Okay.
Okay.
So attachment is really created in infancy. So the more nurturing and loving and communicative the parent is to their infant, the more secure attachment they will have. So it's that those nonverbal communications, the body language, all of that plays into attachment. Now, that's not to say that life experiences, traumas, you know, and their own personality don't play a part, because they do. In fact, in my own life, I started with secure attachment, had a bunch of trauma, became insecure, and then worked out of it as I went through therapy. So that's one thing, is that attachment styles do change. So those clients who have disorganized, fearful attachment or anxious attachment, you can give them the hope that yes, we can change that with therapy.
It's good.
So secure attachment develops when the child's brought up in the warm, nurturing environment. Covered that. Insecure attachment. So there are 3 different types. You've got anxious attachment, which occurs when the parents are inconsistent or misattuned or emotionally distant from their child. What this does is it creates confusion in the child's mind, so they don't know what to trust. Then you've got avoidant dismissive, which occurs when the caregivers basically tell the kid at a young age, you know, stop crying, or you shouldn't feel that way. You know, they're very dismissive about their emotions. And then disorganized, fearful, avoidant results from trauma, basically neglect, abuse, and the child learns that the world is really unsafe and they can't trust anyone, and they've not been given the tools to comfort themselves. So a lot of times, and I didn't put this in here, but a lot of times people who appear to be narcissistic are actually disorganized, fearful, because they will actually act antisocial, or they'll become very arrogant, and it's a cover for their insecurities.
Sure.
So yeah, attachment can change. So basically improving your nonverbals, improving emotional intelligence, nurturing relationships with securely attached people, and also resolving those childhood traumas. And it can get real complicated if they have compounded traumas. So this isn't a one and done. It takes some hard work for these people to really pull out or change their attachment style, I should say.
Okay.
So then we move on to love languages, and I usually start with attachment, and then I move on to love languages. And I love the love languages. This again is free. Gary Chapman, he's got a whole series of books on love languages. So he's got 4 different assessments now. He just came up with a new one. So he's got the love languages, which covers the acts of service, the different types of love language, I guess, which is acts of service, quality time, receiving gifts, words of affirmation, and physical touch. And it's interesting that if you don't explain this to the client, especially a lot of times a man looks at physical touch as sex, whereas that's not necessarily what it means. So actually walking your clients through this is really important. Apology language is very powerful, because it allows, especially in couples, or like I've got a mother-daughter that I had take both of these assessments, and it helps them understand how to communicate and connect with one another. They've got one on anger that is also free, and it basically just tells you where you are on a scale, whether you're doing great with managing your anger, whether you need a little help, or man, you're in trouble.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah.
so Jana, do you have time to go through any of those online?
Let me see if I can find them, because I thought I had them pulled up.
Okay. And I know we'll go through the prepare and enrich, but I just want to make sure that, so we kind of show what assessments will look like online, how, how they're taken, things like that for like the love languages. I'm going to have them do the attachment one here.
Okay. Okay. Let me go at this a different way, because I can't find it on the screen.
Okay.
Okay. So here's the love language. So this is what your client will be emailed. The downfall of these is that you don't get a copy. They go directly to the client.
Okay.
So if they forget to bring it in, then it can be an inconvenience. So this basically, it rates your different gifts. So this is my love language. So mine's acts of service. So recognizing the ins and outs of acts of service, because that's my primary gift, what I have to be cautious of is that I overdo, and I give, and I work, and I work, and I give until there's nothing left. So it's also coaching your client on how to manage their gifts.
Yeah, and let me go through one thing too. So it also acts of service or quality time and all that. Sometimes those can be confused, so I had, so there's a couple out there that, they were creating something, and so the husband would work really diligently at that, and it was with the wife. And so he counted that as quality time, where she thinks quality time is something totally different, where it would be more personable. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, being able to explain what each one of those means to your clients is good.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, so that's that one. Here's the anger. So it just gives you a scale.
Good.
Now, because I have not seen any of my clients' assessments, and I'll be real honest, there's one gentleman who said that he was in the green, and I thought, oh no, you're not. You are in such denial. You're an angry man.
Yes.
So
Jana,
that's, yeah.
Jana, that's a great point, because that's what we talked about yesterday in class was when people are to take assessments, it's generally not thinking of how others view you or how you want to be viewed. It's like how you are in the moment. So that's, yeah, I'm glad that you said that. It's very important.
Yeah. Yeah. So that one is anger. Then we've got well, I didn't do apology. But it's very similar to this one, where
Okay.
it breaks it down into the different types of apology language.
Okay, that's good.
Which is right here. It's plan change, make restitution, accept responsibility, request forgiveness, or express regret. And what we find is that oftentimes we work out of our own love language or our own apology language, and it may or may not match our partner. Oftentimes it doesn't, because opposites attract.
Right.
So, and again, it's explaining these different languages to your clients so that they understand what plan change really means, or making restitution, what that means.
It's good.
Okay. Where are we? Okay, so then Gary offers all of these books on love languages.
Have you read those?
Huh?
No, I've seen the bottom left one. I haven't seen the other ones.
Yeah, he's got a whole slew of them.
Okay. Do they go into, do they all go into different?
Yeah, one of them is for teenagers. One of them, like the flag, is for veterans and first responders.
Excellent.
I think there's a Spanish version, but it's all on his website, which the link you can just Google Gary Chapman, or it's just 5lovelanguages.com.
That's awesome.
Okay. And the one that I didn't cover was, do you feel appreciated at work? So that's for MBA candidates, and it's $25. So that's available too, if you've got somebody that you feel that would be appropriate for.
Very good.
So my last assessment is prepare and enrich. And I went through the training for that at Abundant Life. And I really, really like this assessment.
Yes.
It really breaks it down, and oftentimes I will meet with my clients for the first time, and I will talk with them about, okay, there's an assessment that we can do to evaluate your strengths, where you need to work on. And the majority of my clients, my couples, will do it. I've had 2 that have not. But that's on them. That's not on us. So yeah.
Yeah.
So here is an actual assessment. It takes about a half an hour for each person. So you go in to the Prepare and Enrich website, you add a couple, and then you send the couple the link, and then they pay $35 to take this assessment. It's $35 for both of them.
Gotcha.
You do have to have 2 email addresses because they each get their own assessment. So these are kind of the contents. It breaks it down into their strengths and growth areas, relationship dynamics, personal stress, couple and family maps, and then scope personality scales.
So when they take these tests and then they get these back in their emails, do you suggest them just to bring them into you to talk before?
Actually, they don't get them. The Prepare and Enrich sends them to me.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So I print them off. So
Okay.
let me show you theirs. No, that is theirs. Okay, and then there's a therapist one too that I'll show you here in a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, so it does an overall summary to begin with. So it breaks it down to communication, conflict resolution, partner styles and habits, financial management, and we go through all of those. So this can take 6 to 8 sessions. And what I do is I allow them to choose what they want to work through first. So they get to see their strengths. Obviously, they're really strong in their sexual relationship, really strong in family and friends. Roles and responsibilities, financial, those are all pretty even. So the backstory on this couple is that married, they're basically newlyweds, and she had an affair on her husband. So going through this has been very interesting for me, because when you get to the relationship dynamics, I already knew that she was not assertive. She had low self-confidence. I did find it interesting that she had a higher partner dominance.
Well, yeah, and what do you think that means?
I think that she controlled him with her moods.
Right.
Yeah, is what I saw. But look at how high her avoidance is.
Yes. That's off the charts almost.
Yeah. Yeah.
So look at it now. If you look at this assessment here, and it says self-confidence, his self-confidence is very high, and her avoidance is very high. Her self-confidence is low. Those are 2 different people. Right there. So Jana, let's take it from this point of view. Is like, as you see this assessment, the results of it, and you're just looking at this and you don't know the couple yet, say what would stand out to you in this?
It would make me wonder, even though her partner dominance is higher, I would wonder how much of a voice she actually had, because her self-confidence and assertiveness are so low.
That's a great point. And avoidance.
Yes, and her avoidance is really high.
And so maybe either A, to me, if I'm looking at that, it's like either A, she's been able to use her emotions to get what she wants, maybe screaming, yelling, or whatever. And so she views that as dominance when it's actual dysregulation, if you will.
Right. Absolutely.
So the other part would be, I see his assertiveness, self-confidence high, semi-average on avoidance or whatever, but his partner dominance is low. And I wonder if he just, in viewing all those other ones, just seeks to get along, so maybe he just takes a back seat to emotions, or he can regulate a lot better. Does that make sense?
It does. And he can. And so here's the deal. He's a legacy business owner. And so he's got that confidence of
sure.
having the background in this business, and knowing he's set. He doesn't have to start from scratch like so many young people do.
So if we were
Um,
to see, you know, as Sandeep went through the genogram, if we were to set that in front, and that's where this genogram would work perfectly in
Yes.
with this relationship dynamics, is like generational, just what he was talking about. You know, how were all the other people exactly like him, you know?
Right.
And so is he continuing the pattern because that's what the environment was? But yeah,
And yes,
so
he is.
yes, yeah. And so I just
Yeah.
think that see, and what I'm just trying to, you know, convey here is this assessment combined with other assessments, you get the whole picture.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So yeah.
And that's why I usually use all three of these with my
Yeah.
couples,
Oh, that's
because
perfect.
a lot of it is psychoeducation,
Yes. Oh,
you
absolutely.
know? Yeah. And then also getting them to bring that subconscious to the conscious. And
Mhm.
that's what this one does.
Yeah. So as we go through down this, can you just drill down even onto the assertiveness? And it says, you know, he is generally
Yes.
suppressing. So
And so the genogram is something I didn't do, but I think I'm going to start doing that, because in her case, she's the last of three kids.
mhm.
The other two kids got all of the focus, and so she always felt invisible. She never had a voice, and she was always compared to her siblings.
Mm.
So she always felt like, I'm never enough. I'm never good enough. It doesn't matter what I do, you're never going to see me anyway. And so that's why her assertiveness and self-confidence are so low. And she learned to avoid because she couldn't handle the emotion. It was too painful.
Yes, absolutely.
So, and then it goes on into personal stress. So he's very low, but she was very high because she's still burying all of these emotions. She's still not communicating. She's and she knows she's also lying to her husband because she's having an affair.
Oh, wow.
And she also comes from a very religious background. And she has shared that she felt like she was beat with the Bible. She wasn't taught to have a relationship with Christ.
Mm.
And that makes a huge difference too. In how she sees herself. And yeah, she was, when I first started seeing her, she was very emotionally dysregulated. But now they're doing great after we've gone through this workbook. And that's the thing too, is that you can also get workbooks to purchase for your clients. So that's what I do. And they have a non-religious or non-spiritual version. They have a Christian version, a Catholic version. I can't think of the other one. And then they've got, I think they've got a Jewish version. So it's something that you can give your client, and they can go home and work on the exercises all week long. So they take their homework with them. So for those who are, kind of learn by pictures, this kind of shows them, it's just a different way for them to understand their flexibility and how close they are.
Yeah, can you go through that? I mean, so the blue and the green and
yeah. So he's the blue, she's the green. So she feels somewhat connected and somewhat flexible, where he's very flexible. So like you said earlier, Doug, he's more malleable. He's just wanting to get along. He wants everybody to be happy. And
there
so
comes
he just
there becomes a breaking point
Yeah.
at something, you know. So I'm so glad that you did this with him so that they can understand, and so he can see, oh, this is where we need to work and to get her to closer to where I'm at. So
Right.
the white squares there, what do those represent?
Those are kind of the norms.
Mm-hmm.
The more you're close to the norm, you know, if they were right here in the middle,
Mm-hmm.
that would be the perfect place to be.
Mm.
So he's a little bit too flexible.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And she's not flexible enough.
Okay, that makes
And
sense.
that comes from she doesn't feel like she's ever been hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So she has to work harder.
She has to work harder. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And she feels like she has to fight to be seen.
Mm-hmm. So I could see his avoidance going up over
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. And he even recognized that. I mean, we talked about that in our last session. We finished up the workbook, and the week before, I saw the anger come out in him.
Mm.
And that was like week 6 of going through the workbook. And it was the first time I'd seen anger pop. And then this last week, he walked in and he said, I won the war.
Mm.
He said, I realized that forgiveness is a choice.
Yes.
And he said, so I choose to forgive regardless of what my friends and family tell me to do, because they were all telling me to bolt.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So it was really tough. And yet she had the other extreme where her family was telling her, if you don't get back with him, we're walking away from you.
Wow. What
Yeah.
kept him in it?
I think it was the commitment that he made when he got married.
So he's got values.
Mm-hmm.
So
Integrity.
yeah, integrity. So that's some things that probably aren't shown on this on this assessment that that are questions that can come up. So I guess that's where I'm going with it too, is so this assessment shows where they're at in their relationship. It's a snapshot of that, and then so based on a visual representation of it, you can come across with some questions that get you, that your own personal assessment of the situation to guide them. Yeah, that's good.
Absolutely. So then it goes on to a family map. So it kind of took kind of a genogram approach to where they both feel very connected to their families and very flexible. Yet what is interesting is both of them agree that his mother is domineering, unforgiving, and very legalistic. And her whole family is that way. And she's always been invisible. Even now, both of them felt like their wedding day was kind of stolen from them because both of her sisters were pregnant and everybody was making over the pregnant sisters instead of making over her wedding.
Oh,
so it's really interesting dynamics, that everything that comes out as you're going through this assessment with them, and it helps them connect. And it actually, this part really brought them closer because he was very, very supportive of her and expressed, you know, it makes me angry when I see your parents do this or your sisters do this. Yeah.
So it's very good. So everything that you guys have seen today, the genogram, this prepare and enrich, attachment, they can all be used with this couple here to and man, you would be able to pinpoint so much from those 3 tools alone with this couple.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's good.
So then it goes on to personality scales. So he's very social. Well, more social than she is, but she's not very social because she has such low self-esteem. She's more adaptable to change than he is, and he's much more organized than she is.
Well, but those two go along too. So
Yeah,
if he's organized, change may be an issue, and that's part of a personality
right, right.
thing.
But look how pleasing he is.
Yes. Yeah.
And look how emotionally unsteady she was.
Yes. Wow.
Now, the cool thing about this is that I can have them go back and take another assessment.
Yes.
It's a checkup assessment, and we can see where they are now.
So when would you do that with them? How
We
often?
just finished up the book. So our next session, I'll ask them if they want to redo the assessment and see how they're doing, see how much they've grown. I know they've grown a lot because I can see it.
So as you see it, where would you see these scope personality scales? Where would you see them land now, you think, just from your observations?
I think she's more organized, but not as organized as he is.
Yeah.
But she is much more emotionally steady now. And she's finding her voice. Because one thing this has taught them is that he has learned to encourage her to give her opinion. He has learned when she needs to talk, he sets down whatever he's doing and focuses solely on her.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the first time in her life that she's had that.
That's good. Hey, Ryan, can you ask that question to Jana?
Yeah. So one of the things I was just thinking about was, say you're working with a client, whether a couple or just an individual, and it's been, say, a month or any sort of little bit of time, and you're not really sure whether or not there has been growth or not. Would you want to take an assessment to see, or would you be hesitant to, with the fear that if there is not growth or even the opposite of growth, they're actually struggling more in some areas, that it would discourage the client from wanting to keep going or anything like that?
I would probably wait until we got through the entire workbook, because something I found is that things would start connecting. The longer, the further we got into the workbook, the more they were able to connect their social abilities, and how pleasing they are versus their emotional steadiness. So I would wait until I got through the entire workbook. I might pull in, I might change and do a little bit more motivational interviewing or something like that if I really felt like we weren't kind of jumping the curb and getting past some of the issues. But both of these people, this couple, were very motivated, which helps. And that's something you have to assess as well, is if you've got one partner who's very motivated and the other one who's not, you're not going to get the results that I saw with this couple. So then you look at, okay, is there a way to get this person motivated and kind of, do some shock value with them or something to get them to realize, make a decision. What are you in, or are you out on this marriage?
Yeah,
Which
makes
is
sense.
tough. Yeah, it's tough because you want to encourage the marriage, to fight for the marriage, but
Yeah.
that's not always going to happen.
Yeah, sometimes they have to just see what the alternative is.
Right.
Good point. That's a great point, Ryan.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Good question. Thank you.
So this goes into the organization. So this is saying that she is more spontaneous, but also less careful, which was very true in her point, in her situation. She was feeling neglected and unfulfilled, which is what drove her to an affair.
Yeah, or she could, and she's probably more disorganized or less organized.
Yes, yes.
And
And
so
because of her neediness, she couldn't see that the guy that she was involved in was purely in it for sex.
Mhm.
And that was a rude awakening for her, like 3 weeks after we'd started the couples therapy, because the husband came in and said that he'd been watching this guy's Facebook, which I was like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
And he already had a new girlfriend.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he looked at her and said, do you see now that he really didn't care about you at all?
Wow. That's that's pretty big.
That was big. Yeah.
So can you do me a favor? Also go through where it says couple discussion there for each one of those. And so take that as you read that. So take what you read and then how did you apply that, or how would you apply that to this couple?
What I did is, so like with communication, that was very difficult for her. Because she never felt like she was worthy of speaking up. And so I talked about the elephant in the room. And we talked about what their goals were, really focused on their expectations, because they had their roles down, but it was the expectations that they came into the marriage with. So he came into the marriage thinking, okay, check, we're married, check. I'm going to focus on building my business so that I can provide all of these things for her.
Absolutely.
And we'll be
that's a man.
Yeah, total man thing. She got this culture shock where he was attentive, and then all of a sudden, boom, he wasn't.
Yeah.
And it took her right back to her childhood.
Yeah.
And so we talked about that and how he could encourage her to find her voice and feel confident speaking her opinion. So 2 sessions ago, he walked in and said, well, she found her voice. So, I mean, this is an extremely valuable tool because they can take it home. I printed one of these off for each of them. They each got their own workbook. So they could work on it at their own pace.
That's good.
Yeah. And I encourage them to sit down and work on it together.
Now, do you have that workbook handy?
I do.
And the only reason, what
I
I
have
show
pictures
here.
of it.
Okay. So what I want to show people is,
right here.
Okay. But so like the regular one, it's got a lot of pages in it. And what I was wanting to show was, so there's a section on communication, there's a section on financial. And so what this whole system does, it takes what the assessment brought to them, the questions, all that stuff, what the assessment brought to them, and then it provides interventions, it provides tasks and everything associated with making them better, so it's very.
You can't really see it there.
Yeah.
But there are 34 pages in the workbook. And it goes through, starts off with sharing strength and growth areas. So we talked about their strengths, where they needed to grow. Then it led directly into communication. And I'll be honest, I said, I think this is where we should start, which was communication, because they were not communicating at all. And it breaks it down into assertiveness, active listening, creating a wish list, sharing your wish list, daily dialogue and daily compliments, and then gives them communication skills to increase intimacy.
That's good. So I brought up, here's the workbook for the couples. And so as we kind of go along here, can you take that over?
No, that's all in you.
Okay. So anyway, it says, congratulations for going through the assessment. We're happy that you're wanting to create a healthier marriage, blah, 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 right? And so then it gives the additional resources after they've taken the assessment. So you can see here, sharing the growth areas, communication, personal stress, conflict resolution, financial management, leisure activities, all of that. So it really goes into every aspect of their marriage. And that's where the prepare comes in. So if they're not married, that's where it comes in. So the enrich part is after they're married. So how can your marriage be enriched? Or you go back and you take this periodically to see where you're at now, how things have changed. And I think we go through stages of life where things change, and we don't go through those stages together necessarily. So I think every 5 years, something in our life kind of majorly changes, in one way or another. So how can we move through those together? So I love this prepare and enrich, and Gottman's got a thing called 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. And that's another good workbook that will help them with skills to better their skills. So really it's all about awareness, right? So this thing is bringing up awareness. So let's go through this here. So these are ways for them to go through and assess, where they're at, right? So here, check what areas you agree or disagree most with your partner, and select 3 strength areas, most agreement and positive aspects of your relationship, and then select 3 growth areas. So where are we strong and where do we need growth? So it helps them to focus, and you can set those SMART goals that go along with it. Then it gives you areas of how to discuss things. Take turns sharing which each of you perceive as your relationship strengths. Verbally share 1 strength at a time until you each have shared 3. So another thing that you can do, so Gottman would say, to put into this, what you appreciate about the other person. So you can pick 1, 2, 3 characteristics of what you appreciate about that person. So maybe it's their vision or their integrity or something like that. And then you give an example of each of those. So a lot of good tools can come out of these assessments. And then use the same procedure to share and discuss your growth areas, and then discuss 3 questions. Did any of your partner's responses surprise you? So guess what? If anything does surprise you, then we're probably not communicating to the best of our abilities, right? And so even talking through these 3 questions can bring up areas of our lives where we need improvement, or we're doing good in either way. And then what areas did you mostly agree with your partner or disagree? And then communication. So what I love about this is how can you be more assertive? And then active listening. So it kind of, you go through and it teaches you how to be a better listener. So to listen to understand rather than to respond, things like that too. So do you use this, Jana?
They did that on their own.
Oh, they do the
yeah, because I gave them each a workbook.
Mm-hmm.
Now we kind of went through it in session as we went over each category of the assessment.
So I like that. So you bring up the category where they need the most work, where it appears through the assessment, right? And then then this has tools on how to better do that. And so here's the other part I like about it. So what's the Bible say about communication? So it's really hard to find assessments and stuff like that that are so powerful and popular that are also religious driven. There's the 5 love languages, things like that, and then prepare and enrich. But if you go to all, so many assessments that are already out there, not many of them are religious driven, right?
Right.
So I like it. So it just gives you Bible verses to convey how important communication is and so forth.
And what I really like about this Prepare and Enrich is that there's a non-spiritual workbook and assessment, because I've had clients that they do not want to talk about God. They're atheists. They don't. So it gives you another good tool that you're already familiar with, and is thorough.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then here's a personal stress profile. So really, you put all this stuff on paper and you share it with the other person, they're going to go, I did not know that. I did not know that. Or I did know that, and you're good at this. And then you can give compliments, or you can say, hey, we can do this better. So it just opens up all of that dialogue. But it's to also to the counselor to help them have those dialogue moments too, so that it's productive and not, because you all know, like, if you can be talking to somebody and the way that they state an issue can sound like, hey, I need to defend myself, right? So it's teaching them how to convey what their needs and wants and all that stuff is without it like it feeling it's like a criticism or there's contempt or anything like that too. How do you do that, Jana? What type of things do you do?
I work on, I implement like the change triangle or the 4 horsemen of conflict, where it's using the I statements so that they can communicate. When you do this, I feel this way, and it doesn't put the partner on defense. And it's also teaching the partner, oh my gosh, this is what my actions or my words are causing.
So good.
Yeah, it brings that awareness around.
So that's what I like, is like it gives more Bible verses of what personal stress and anxiety means in the marriage, right? And then conflict resolution. So 10 steps for resolving conflict. I love this. So it gives you step-by-step directions on how to do it. And set a time and place for discussion, define the problem, list the ways you each contribute to this problem, list past attempts to resolve the issue that were not successful, brainstorm 10 possible solutions to the problem. So what's this do? This just brings everybody into more connection and working together. I mean, I just think this is one of my favorites. It's so easy and basic, but it's brilliant.
Well, and the really cool thing about that is you could copy that conflict resolution page and use it with individuals who are struggling with that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so here's another part I like, because one of the biggest and most major things that come along is finances in our marriage, and that's what drives us apart. So as you may have, and this goes back to attachment too, right? So you may have a family that they spent and didn't save, right? So they live life to the fullest or whatever. And then you may have this person marrying somebody that in their family, they saved every dime and they squeezed every penny. So how's that going to affect each other, and what's that look like? So yeah, this is good. So the challenges of money, so it says, here's what the challenges are, but then it helps them to break down into a budget or financial management. How important are these, the meaning of money, right? And so, going through those 16 things and then interpreting what those scores are, but then how to go through and do financial management. And the best thing I do is like say, get a financial manager to help you too. Yeah. So yeah, this is good. So let me stop this share, and I want to open this up to questions, especially for our students here.
This is sort of just a general assessment question. But one of the things I was just kind of wondering is like how early on, if at all, are you setting a timeline for like achieving goals, or even just like how long you plan on meeting with a client? In terms of like, do we want this much progress in X amount of time? You know, like I guess one of the things I'm just not super familiar with is like the average amount of time or sessions you have with a client. You know, is that like generally 6 months? Is it a year? Is it 2 months? Does it totally vary depending on the client? And
Totally
again,
varies.
do you even establish that?
I don't worry about setting a timeline on it because so I do mostly trauma work. So with trauma work, what I'm finding is that most of my clients are compounded trauma. So we get through one and then all of these other things start bubbling up. So um, I try to go into each session reviewing the history and what we've talked about and knowing where we left off, but also knowing there may be a new crisis that pops up that we have to deal with then. So we can't necessarily get back to where we stopped, you know, where we ended. Now with this prepare and enrich, it tells you to bank on 6 to 8 weeks to get through the workbook. And we took I think 7 weeks to get through the workbook.
Wow, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that makes sense.
Does it answer your question?
Yeah, that's kind of what I figured. I just want to know what the kind of general consensus was with that. Yeah.
So Ryan, let me, I'll add to what she said too. So I think the dynamics are a little bit different too for Abundant Life Counseling Center, because we're low cost for one. So it's affordable for these people to go as long as they want. So the other part is we don't accept insurance, right? And that's why we keep our prices down, because we don't take insurance. But if we were to take insurance, then insurance only pays for so many sessions. And so it's kind of like going to, that's where your diagnosis comes in, right? And insurance companies always want you to diagnose very quickly. And so it's kind of like taking your car to a mechanic and said, they have this book. It says, okay, we're going to take your radiator out and put in a new one. Well, then you go to this book and it says, okay, to take a radiator out, it should take this long. So the whole job should take this long, and this is what we're going to charge you. So that's the way insurance is. So now if the mechanic goes overtime, then he eats that generally. And if he goes under time, well, then he's made more of a profit that way. So that's so in working with people through insurance. So if you have some kind of like adjustment disorder or something, they're going to go, okay, you see here, you diagnose them with an adjustment disorder. They look in their book and shit. It says it should take 8 sessions for them to get better. Right. So we're only going to pay for 8, and anything after that, it's on their dime. Right. So so those are the two different dynamics. So we have the luxury of being able to see people longer. And that takes a lot of stress off of both the clinician and the client. So does that help, Brian?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So when you get into private practice and things like that too, now if you take insurance, I mean, it's totally up to the person. And they say, hey, insurance is going to pay for 8, but I think you're going to need 12. it'll come out of pocket for you, and or they can negotiate price or something like that. But
I have a question.
Yeah.
Miss Jana, I'm not sure if I missed it because I lost connection. Where are you going with this couple after the workbook? Or is that it? Are you done?
Well, no, we're going to continue working on making sure that they've got their communication skills down, because it's easy to slide back into comfortable behaviors. So we'll continue doing some work. I'll have them do a reassessment. It's called a checkup, see where they are. And once I feel like they're really stable, then I'm going to leave it up to them, because, they're young, and for them to come in once a week for 50 minutes with me probably isn't the highest on their priority, long term. And I'm big on, I don't want people being dependent on me. So once I feel like they're stable, then I'm going to say, you know what, it's totally up to you. If you want to keep coming in, you can do that. We can touch base once a month, whatever you want to do.
Okay, thank you.
So she's also assessing through the whole thing, what's their dependence on me, or are they getting stronger? So I'm able to see them longer if they're not depending on me much and they're getting better. So it's kind of, I think sometimes counseling can turn into coaching, right?
Yes.
Because I think, whenever you uncover one thing, 10 more things can pop up. So then you either work on one thing at a time, or you can try to take care of those 10. But I think it turns into coaching, or it can, and be productive too.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes as a therapist, you have to step back and say, okay, what are the skills that are lacking that I need to teach here? Because if I teach a certain set of skills, it may cover 6 out of those 10 issues, which just gives them more independence.
So how do you know when they've become too dependent on you, when you don't see change, or when you see change, but they continue to want to?
When they're constantly leaning on me.
Mm-hmm.
If they're constantly texting me or sending me emails, then they're not, the skill set's not sinking in. So then I need to look at, okay, how do I need to teach this differently?
Got it.
Yeah, that's very good. Dylan, you have any questions? Or what are your observations? Or Angeline?
I don't have anything. I guess I've used, well, not used, but I'm familiar with Enrich.
Yeah.
And I think it's really helpful to have Jana explain everything. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
What was your favorite part of like Prepare and Enrich that it showed somebody else or you or whatever?
Well, my husband and I went through it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So that was really helpful for us, especially coming from a different culture and backgrounds, and our previous marriages. So that was really helpful. I think my favorite is really understanding, I think, the personality, and also finances, because we're coming from a different background and understanding the money. And so that was really helpful for us. So
That's awesome. Oh, absolutely. You know what? One thing that we haven't done, and we talked a lot about this yesterday, was the multicultural aspect of it, and you just brought that up. So Jana, have you worked with this with a multicultural couple at all?
I have not. I
Okay.
have a mother-daughter that are multicultural that
Yeah.
I've thought, gosh, I don't know, could I use this with a mother-daughter couple?
Yeah, I don't know what they would do with some of the questions about intimacy and stuff like that, but
Right. They just ignore those, but
Mhm.
that's what I'd love to see as something for um
Families.
families.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
family systems. There you go. There's your $1 million.
there you go.
Come up with that. Yeah. So Jana, how would you see this working in a multicultural? I mean, what do you see that this would help? Do you see any obstacles in it that
I would think it would only be beneficial because what it just brings transparency
Mhm.
to belief systems and behaviors and um and Angelina could probably speak more to that than I could since you've actually experienced it.
Yeah, I think it's more on I think personality, because I've more into that, like when I marry my husband. Like, I grew up in the Philippines, so I've had like a different upbringing than him, and so culture was such a hard it was a big deal in our marriage. I think the first year was really hard for us because it was just hard, like different understanding on just everything, almost everything. And so that was a big deal. And so when we went through it, it was really helpful to really see and understand, okay, this is how he viewed these things, and this is how I viewed things. And so coming up and to how to compromise in those things. So that was helpful.
Yeah. So
For
those
sure.
conversations allowed you to
Mhm.
communicate so that you could compromise.
Yes. And then um, the couple actually, so we went through counseling session with a couple in our church, and so that was really helpful for us too, for um, somebody who's a guy, have my husband like explain it to my husband, and a woman explaining it to me too, so that was really great.
Good.
um to
from
really
the
see that.
different from the
Yes.
different perspectives? That's awesome.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
So did you
Yeah.
feel that when you were using this tool, that it helped each person to understand the difference in cultures?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Absolutely.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay, perfect. That's what we needed to know. Thank you. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I need to jump off because I've got
Okay.
my gal that I talked about earlier. She
Yeah.
texted and wants to get together. So I'm going to go
Sounds
be with her.
good.
Yeah. All
Oh,
right. Thanks,
okay.
everybody.
Awesome.
Bye.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time today.
You bet.
Okay.
My pleasure.
All right. So, let's so class, let's take a break, and we'll come back on this same Zoom link, okay, at 1 o'clock. Give you an hour.
Works for me.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.